So it is a beautiful snowy winter day, and big snowflakes are falling outside my window, and I am working on my video game Project Enoch right now, which is the late 90s video game that never was. Um, right now, my main part of the game that I'm working on is the AI system. I'm working from the Quake engine. AI is my sort of a baseline. This entire game is going to be running in either a modified version of the Quake engine or just FTEQW, depending on what my needs end up being in the end. Probably just using FTEQW unless for performance reasons I need to switch to something else. Or for packaging, I don't know. But essentially, the idea with my AI system is I want to take all the things that I really liked from Halo's AI system. So there was this GDC talk. I don't remember the year, but they were talking about Halo Combat Evolved's AI system. They use what you might call a hierarchical state machine or a behavior tree. It's one of the most complicated AI systems I've seen in gaming, and I really liked the results that I saw. Just I've put so many hours into Halo Reach, Halo 3, even Halo Combat Evolved, and I think that game series has some of the most engaging AI to fight against in pretty much every video game. I mean, if you compare it directly to, say, a game like Destiny, I think Halo's AI knocks it out of the water with being unpredictable, yet you feel like you sort of have an idea what they're going to do, but it's still engaging. Whereas with Destiny, their AI is very predictable. You can sort of pop out of cover, shoot, pop out of cover and shoot, pop out of cover and shoots, and it doesn't get very dynamic in that way. Um, so how Halo's AI works is that essentially the interesting part is that there's a knowledge model of the battlefield. So the AI are sorted in various ways. I believe there's a squad system where there's a squad leader, typically an elite, and then he has his minions, the elite miners, the grunts, the jackals, and they all have this perception of the battlefield. The different enemies on the battlefield have to see the player, have to see the Marines, and the Marines have to see the Covenants to actually know where they are at any point in time. And so if you hide behind cover and then sneak away somewhere else, you might see the elites sneak up to where you were hiding behind cover and expect to see you there. And then if they don't, they might act surprised. And so I tried to re-implement that in the Quake engine. I was sorting the monsters into squads. There was a squad entity class that I created, and essentially all of the monsters would be connected to that squad class using one of its fields, sort of like the dot enemy field in Quake. I had a dot ally field, and instead of giving every single enemy its own knowledge model of the battlefield, I had the squads look through sort of the virtual eyes of each monster to develop a squad level knowledge model that was using essentially virtual monsters or virtual players, I suppose, that wherever a monster saw a player entity, then it would update the location and status of a virtual player entity that was in this AI memory class. But what I found with that system is that I basically felt like I was fighting with the ghost of John Carmack or whoever originally coded that portion of the game engine. It just was not meant to do this. And so I decided to pivot more towards the other significant part of how Halo's AI works, where if you look at the GDC talk or you look at any documentation on Halo's AI, you'll typically see screenshots where there's these huge numbers of points essentially spread out across the map. And what that is uh, part of their navigation system, and it's essentially a pre-scripting uh, way that they handle the encounters. So they'll have it so that elites are meant to spawn in various points, and then depending on where the player is standing. So if the player activates a sort of a trigger zone, then the elites know that they hold these defense points or these offense points, depending on how they're set up. And there's this, there is a behavior tree, so there's a logical tree behind it, but there's also a very linear aspect to how they engage, or how the AI behave in particular engagements that the level designer will build into every map, instead of relying all on a sort of a one-size-fits-all architecture for Halo's AI. So I'm currently working on setting up some prototype test environments for a new attempt at this system, with a higher emphasis on the linear scripting and designing the behaviors I want into the levels themselves. I had a previous prototyping space where I was testing my previous version of the AI, and so I had in this room it's showing fighting between two different teams of AI, and I was trying to get them to prioritize the more dangerous enemy. I had a soldier spawning in one point and an enforcer spawning another point, using Quake's enemies for testing. And I've tried to get it so that these guys would always kill the enforcer first, then the soldier. Didn't have a huge amount of success with that. They were doing it about half the time. So I just think that had something to do with the way I was abusing the what was the function called? It was the one that it was the check client function. I had changed the check clients function in a way that it was not only checking for clients, but also checking for monsters. And that wasn't being entirely effective at finding all the monsters and allies quickly to build a knowledge model for the squads in time to actually start the engagement. And so I'm going back on that method, and instead I want to focus more on taking advantage of the things that do work in Quake's code and avoiding the things that don't. So if enemies of different teams are somewhere on the map, instead of abusing the check client function to cause them to fight each other, I want to use, I guess, different functions, more intentional functions, particularly just like the in-fight trigger from Prog's dump, I believe. It's probably from somewhere else originally. But just taking a look at the code for that, doing something similar where I use trigger volumes to let the monsters of different teams understand where each other are, and to manually start that encounter when the player will actually see what's going on. Here I have sort of a demonstration of what I was talking about with the Halo AI, where the player would enter this area, the enemies would spawn in, and you could take cover behind this point and then sneak away out to the side passage. And the intention was that the enemies would come and search for you over here. And without using points to sort of script out this exact behavior, I found it pretty difficult to write a sort of a universal AI that would lead to Quake's monsters behaving in this way. And then here I was testing the ability to get Quake monsters to ignore fighting the player and actually go to their objective. With all of these different demonstrations, the only one that really behaved in the way I wanted it to in the end was this demonstration. The other ones, they're all very finicky. There's another one, I have a rocket launcher here. I wanted the enemies to sort of scramble sideways, like sort of disperse when a rocket launcher was pointed at them. I couldn't. I didn't work too hard on getting this one to work. I pretty much knew this model was going up basically into the rubbish bin by the time I got that coded out and not working. But so yeah, I'm moving over to this new system, which I'm referring to as a logical AI system instead of a hierarchical state machine, where instead of all that nonsense, I just have the player will trigger some sort of a trigger, and then I'll have monsters spawn in. They'll go to where their pathing instructs them. And then from that point, what I would like them to do is, if there's no change in their pathing, if they've arrived at where I want the monster to be, I want it to sort of hang out in an area around this point and then fight the player in a semi-dynamic way. So normally in monster run or AI run, what the monster will do is it'll more or less run directly at the player. If they're not going for a as missile or at a ranged attack, what they'll do is they'll run at the player and then they'll sort of strafe one way and then they'll strafe another way, run directly at the player. So I sort of want to mirror that kind of behavior and say, you stay around this point, but you sort of run a little bit this way, run a little bit that way inside the points, just so that you're not behaving as a turret. So that's what I envision happening with the pathing points. And then the other thing I would really like them to be able to do is I want to be able to instruct the monsters sort of just run into this area here and behave relatively normally, but don't leave this zone. If the player activates this trigger, I want you to go over here and stay here. And then from there, there's some changes I like to make. I'm currently using the Mobots from Prog's Dump, which is taken from another mod, and I don't think that it is ideal for a game where I primarily want respawning enemies as an option in the single player mode. And I'll get more into that, probably not here, but at some other time. But essentially what I'd like to do is just take these monster definitions. I'll have my own monster definitions, not using Quake's definitions, which are already out of palette. And I would essentially just place regular monster definitions around the map and then set respawn settings, like, is this placed at the start of the mission? Is this actively respawning now? Does it need to be triggered? What counts do I respawn? Where do they go once they spawn? All these sorts of things. If you've ever worked in Halo's Forge mode, you'll know that they have these fields that you've had access to since Halo 3. Place at start, spawn cap limit, and respawn time, which can be a value up to, like, I think in Halo it goes up to like 2 or 3 minutes, or you could set it as never. And the spawn caps are like you can limit it so that there's only the one instance of this item, or extrapolating out to enemy on this map, or you could say, well, if this enemy spawns in and then 30 seconds later the respawn timer is up, but this guy is still alive, then you can still add another. Or you could say, well, we have 2 or 3 different points where this object can spawn, but we're going to limit it to just having one on the map at a time anyways. So those are essentially fields that I'm used to using. I've made Halo maps before. And so I'd like to use those sorts of fields and sort of that streamlined setup for monster or item spawning in my game, instead of this sort of convoluted method using the Mobots mod for Quake, where we have these func spawners, and then we have these spawn points, and then just recently they added the ability for targets to be forwarded. When I first started working on my previous AI model, I had to implement that myself. So I guess what I'm going to be working on next is sort of getting these zones to work. Currently, when testing my progs def, what happens is the guys with these path corners, they can go to these corners and they'll actually fight the player basically like a turret just standing there. And what I want them to do is move around just a little bit. And I also implemented this zone, but it's just not working at all. The ideal was that, you know, these guys would spawn, you know, on their spawn points, run to the center of this monster zone, or, you know, generally into the monster zone, then run at the player who's standing maybe in the entryway, and then they'd sort of struggle to fight the player within the zone. Or if they're on this side and they were running to this path corner, I'd want them to hang out over here. I have been having a one guy, this guy over all the way on the left. This isn't real, but I have this guy over on the left, whereas he's behaving differently from the others, which they spawn at their spawn points, they run to their path, and they stay there. This guy on the far left, he's running to his path corner, and then his goal entity's been changing to the player, and then he runs all the way out. I'm not sure what's causing that discrepancy. Could be that these other 3 aren't touching the path corners when they should be. So that'll be interesting to try and fix that error and get these guys all running to their path and then staying around here. Show what this looks like in action. We got protological. You see these guys all more or less run to their points. Looks like this time this guy is behaving as well. But they don't look very smart when they don't move. And this guy broke free, it looks like. No, he's just running back to his point. Okay. I also have them dropping coins in this version, but don't worry about that. We have these guys, they just do what they want, which is be confused. I don't know if they're trying to path towards the other points. I can, I guess, try to figure out what's going on here. But the intention would be that they would run basically to where I'm standing right now and then fight the player. But yeah, they are targeting over here. They aren't targeting into this corner that they're trying to run into. So I'm not exactly sure what that problem is. Have to look into it. But that's essentially what I'm working on right now, the state of where this part of the game is. And yeah, if you have any ideas of what I should be doing differently, how I can improve this system, I would love to hear it.